Hey there. My name's Danny Leibrandt, and I'm the founder of Pest Control SEO, where we grow pest control companies with SEO. Today, I am with Mark Hummel, who's actually a special guest, and I've never really had someone like him on the podcast, so this is definitely going to be an interesting one. So, Mark is the CEO of Pest Empire Builder, which is a mastermind for and really coaching program for pest control companies, and he's also the CEO of Inspection Empire Builder, where it's a mastermind and coaching program for inspectors. So very interesting. And his kind of expertise and background is that he is great at coaching and leading others. And he's also got a master's in business where all he focuses on is building these systems and, really how can we scale companies? So not just specifically pest control or any other industry, but, what does it take and what do we need to put in place to really scale a company? So I'm super interested to hear what Mark has to say. And yeah, so grateful to have you on, Mark.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm honored to be here, and really, it's just great to get to know you and have a chance to sort of unpack what we're doing for pest companies. And if we talk about the inspection side of things too, happy to just kind of uncover what we're here to do.
Cool. Awesome, man. So tell me, so usually I like to start where like, how'd you get into marketing or how'd you get into pest control? But I know your first thing it leads, at least in that regard, is Inspection Builder Pro. So tell me how you originally started that. What's kind of the background there?
Yeah, so Inspector Empire Builder, or IEB for short, started, something like 6 years ago or so. And it originally started as an idea, like getting people together, talk business, mastermind style, and cut the trial and error out of growing, scaling, and refining home inspection businesses. And so that actually turned into something that nobody really would have probably predicted, because a traditional mastermind group is something like 10 or 20 people, and that's large. And you would kind of dive deep and help each other in your businesses and different things like that. Well, the home inspection group ended up turning into a business today that has 250 company owners in membership. And they're all doing business coaching, and they're all coming to our quarterly conferences and doing really cool stuff, just kind of cutting the trial and error out of that buzz phrase there that we use, which is growing, scaling, refining their business. So yeah, it's definitely been an awesome journey, and it's kind of what led us to this big idea of coaching and training in other lanes such as pest. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there with what people have been able to do with coaching, what people have been able to do with simply surrounding themselves with people who have a vision and are walking out an actual business strategy and an actual business plan.
Interesting. Yeah, tell me more about building up that community. So, I mean, even there might be some people in the audience that might be interested in building a community of their own, whether, it's for marketing or pest control, whatever it is. How did you build up that community to 250 members?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that too. I didn't expect that. This is one of the things that I love to do sort of on the side. People ask me all the time questions like that. How do you build a community, or how do you bring people together? Well, the truth is it's both simpler and harder than it sounds. It's really simple in that once you get very specific about who and how you want to help, you just start finding people that align with that, right? And so, for example, with the inspection side of things, home inspectors who wanted to become the person who could grow a really great business. And so for that, we started looking for people, and we still do, started looking for people who were building a life. They weren't just running a business, they were building a life, right? That's kind of step one. And that's what's led to the culture of the group. And then it kind of takes on a life of its own. Of course, to get to the size and scale that we have, there has to be a marketing machine in place, and you've got to have some great reach and brand awareness and things like that as well. What we have found is that we organically grew quickly because of trust building and providing something really valuable with a very specific niche. And so that's what I would tell anybody, like, whether it's marketing or pest or inspections or whatever your thing is, like, you can surround yourself with people that are just like you, build trust, and pull more people toward you, and it becomes this really attractive thing.
Definitely. No, I'm a huge believer in community. And I think it's super prevalent now because, maybe back in the day, people were kind of just in their local community and, I don't know, maybe you're a business owner and you want to start up like a restaurant. Then you have another friend and maybe, I don't know, that they start like I don't know, like a wine restaurant. I don't know, something like that. But you kind of have people in your local community. But what's happened now is because people might be growing, a huge local business or potentially like a online business, then you want to be able to have that community with people that are like you, but they're probably not nearby. I mean, I'm sure there are people in your community that are all over the US, maybe even potentially other countries as well. So I'm a huge believer in networking and community, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, man, what technology has allowed people to do at this point. I mean, we of course live on Zoom at this point. I work from my house, and
yeah,
all of the clients we have are all over the country. Most of them are in the US and Canada. And then every once in a while, we get people from Australia that jump into our mastermind groups, and I can't figure that out. I don't know how they're making that time zone change work, but it's a thing. And then the fact that we can just jump on a Zoom call and help each other cut the trial and error out of our business journey, that's still wild to me, even though we've been doing it for years and years and years at this point. So yeah, I mean, technology's brought us a long way, man. It's really expanded our borders and the people that we have access to.
Definitely. And I want to hear more about exactly what the mastermind is like in both of them, really, because I'm sure you run both of them kind of the same way. So is it like weekly calls? Are there any courses in there? Do they get like direct access to some of the people? How exactly does it work?
Yeah, good question. So the Pest group and the inspection group follow the same model. In fact, one is Inspector Empire Builder, the other is Pest Empire Builder. If you go to the two websites, they look the same because we just hit duplicate. It's a good model, so we just follow the model.
Yeah.
And so the the way the membership works is once somebody is curious about it, we typically will connect and have a conversation. And what we're really looking for is people that fit the culture of the group. And what that means is, if you're kind of overly negative and everything's kind of happening to you and nothing's ever good enough, you're probably not going to get a lot out of this group. But if you're the kind of person that really wants to build something special and you're like, man, I have a vision so big that there's no problem that's going to slow me down. That's kind of the DNA, if you will, of the group. Now, I'll back that up a step and say a lot of people have trouble with that because they know they want to build something, they don't know what it is, and they need clarity, right? And so either way, somebody who's future focused, kind of this abundance minded persona, and really wants to both give and get from a group like this, they're a shoe-in culture fit, right? So we kind of look for that. And we won't let anybody in who's going to take away from that, if that makes sense. So for anybody out there who's like looking for a group to jump into, that's one of the things that's really important, whether it's our group or any others. Like, you want to jump into a group of people who are going to pull you forward and not just hold you down where you are. And then that's really important.
Awesome.
So the groups are run by industry experts. So I'm a business coach. I take a holistic approach to coaching people and helping them become the person who can do the things that they want to do. All of our other coaches are from the industries that we serve. So on the inspection side, they're all inspectors who have grown what we call enterprise level companies. And those guys are they have the largest companies in the country, right? And so they've been at every business stage there is for those companies. On the Pest side of things, it's a little different. Those coaches are also industry experts. They've bought, sold, repeat companies, and they've been all over the place as well as far as business stages. But what we see in that space is people are really hungry for what it looks like and what it takes to build high-performing teams. And so those coaches are really focused on, of course, the service, operations, growth, financials, the economic models, all that kind of stuff. But what we have found that people keep asking us for is, I need to learn how to recruit. I need to learn how to really select the right candidates. And then I need to learn how to train them effectively and quickly so that they're producing fast. And then I need to learn how to manage them and motivate them and keep things moving. And we reference that as winning through your team, right? Okay. So to kind of tie a bow on all that and answer your question, people jump onto coaching calls, their group coaching calls with these industry experts, and the coaches will teach some information, bring some systems, processes, and really kind of teach the frameworks for things like that. And then we'll spend time masterminding with the group, hearing from people, what's going on in their business, helping them live right there on the coaching calls. And that's where we see a lot of cutting out the trial and error with the things that people are working on.
Cool. Awesome. And also just kind of curious on this one. So you started Inspector Empire Builder about a few years ago, and then you started Pest Empire Builder, about a year ago or so. Why did you start the pest control one?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. We didn't necessarily set out to do a pest group, but we were so successful on the inspection side, and there happens to be quite a few people who have both a pest company and a home inspection business. And so people began asking us to start a group for people who had a pest company, and we thought, okay, well let's test it out. Let's see if we can help people in that lane. And so we started it. We ran that group for about a year. There's about 20 or so companies in it, and it was fantastic. It was a great experience for those people. And we kind of proved the model, if you will, and decided, we might have something here. Let's go ahead and launch this out into its own mastermind group and see what we can do to help more people in the pest industry.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And, tell me, how's it been going? Like, maybe some of the results that people have seen, like what are people saying, kind of what it's like?
Yeah, so there's always two ways to answer that. The first way is we hear this a lot. It's just nice to know that you're not the only one going through something. So like when you jump into a group and suddenly you have a tribe of people who are doing the same thing you're doing, it really just gets you more excited about doing business and more clear about how you're doing it. And so that's a really powerful effect that we hear a lot. The other thing that we hear is that people they're growing faster and they're doing it with less friction because we're starting to layer on principles with winning through your team and trying out different types of growth strategies and different things like that. For example, a lot of people like door-to-door, right? So we do a lot of education around door-to-door. Some people don't like door-to-door. So we talk a lot about SEO and a lot about all the other different digital campaigns and things you can do to reach people. So there's a wide range of things we talk about. But to really take a zoomed out look at it and see what the results are of being in the group, what we really love to see is that people are beginning to win through a systems and process driven business where you can replicate success by doing the right things over and over again until you can hand those things off to somebody else, and then your team is doing the right things over and over again, rinse and repeat.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I feel like the typical story in the pest control world of people that are maybe at like $1 million or so is, maybe they worked for Orkin or, some kind of pest control company. Maybe it was their parents' company, and now they want to start their own company. And, they were a solo operator, and, they started just hiring accordingly, getting more leads in the door. And now they kind of have this like, not random team, but just like a bunch of moving parts that, maybe don't make sense. Maybe they have like a agency that isn't really doing anything. And I think what a lot of these companies that are lacking, that might be at $1 million or so, is not having those correct systems in place in order to scale. So like, what are some of those systems that they need?
Well, the first thing is a business structure, right? And so this is something that we find quite often in any business, in any industry, really. This is a small business problem, not just a pest business problem. So having a structure that you're sticking to is really important. And so in this case, we would say, look through the lens of service, operations, growth, right? So those are three divisions you can look at in a service-based business, such as a pest control company. And so when you can start to divide your company up into those divisions, then you can start to conceptualize what it would look like to have systems and processes in each of those, right? So one of the things that's really common, especially as you're growing and starting out, is you're the technician, you're doing the work. And so you're wearing all three of those hats. You're the service person, you're the operations person, you're the growth person. And what typically happens is you'll excel at one or two of those, while the other, or with other one or two, are miserable failures, or maybe at the least they're lagging behind and not supporting each other. And so typically when somebody comes into a group like ours, That's the first thing that's uncovered is like, what's the structure that you have for your business? Or maybe we could say the business model that you're following. Once we get things like that squared away, then it's really about shifting your thinking from technician-minded running your company like a technician to really running it like a business owner, right? Like an entrepreneur or a CEO. And a lot of guys believe that they're doing really well with that, but it's really not all that common that people are doing really well with that. The evidence of that, the evidence that they're doing well running their business at the highest level of leadership is that they're clearing their plate and doing less over time rather than doing more, or getting stuck in one lane of their business. Right. And there's nothing wrong with being a solopreneur. And so I do want to throw that out there that if you want to wear all the hats and you want to just kind of stay small, nothing wrong with that. There's business structure for that too. And we actually have people in our membership that are perfectly comfortable just being the technician, and they just need smart systems and processes for that. However, what I find is that most people have a vision in their mind where it's like, I'll be the technician for a little while, but I don't want to be the technician forever. And those are the people that end up hiring a team of people. They end up beating their head against the wall with things like attrition for their team or poor servicing because they're not following really great standards. And then of course that leads to a lot of wasted time and effort and energy on the leadership because you get pulled into one lane of your business, you get stuck, and then all of a sudden you're not doing growth work, and then you go over to do growth work and you get stuck, and then all of a sudden you're not supporting services, and this pattern just plays out over and over again.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about transitioning from kind of the technician mentality to more like business owner? Like what does that take? What are some of maybe the beliefs people need to break? Does it take a while, or can you just kind of flip a switch and do that? Tell me.
It really depends on the person. I mean, we've seen people make that flip overnight, where they just were suddenly exposed to people who thought differently, and they just adopted it and they ran with it.
Huh.
We've also been exposed to people that it took them years to finally decide, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm running this like a technician. For me as a business coach, I'm always going to say, what's the evidence of how you're thinking, right? And your business will tell you. Like, you look at your business and ask yourself some really powerful questions, and it will tell you if you're running it like a technician or like a real business leader. And one question would be, if somebody was to think about your business, who in their mind pops up? Is it just you, or is it the brand? Right. And so for a lot of people who are really thinking like a technician, they've kind of got themselves stuck in this way of thinking, and that like they are the value. They're a great technician. They're providing a good service. Do business with me because I'm awesome, rather than do business with my company because the company is awesome. And then another thing would be, we see people really pulling systems and processes to them. And that's a technician, right? I'm going to get good at everything. I'm going to be the absolute best. I'm going to be technically sound in every single lane. That's just not really efficient when you think about it. And so if somebody's pulling all of their systems and processes to them and trying to do everything instead of delegating things properly or building a path for somebody else to grab something and keep it and own it, then it's probably good evidence that they're running their business like a technician. Like, it's all about me. I'm the one who has to do everything. If I don't do well, nobody will do well. And the highest performing businesses and the highest performing teams have leaders that are really good at delegating stuff out. And those people end up being better than the leader at those things.
Yeah, 100%. Some question that just popped up in my mind is, you talk with a lot of these high level entrepreneurs that might be, probably 7 figures, maybe 8 figures, even 9 figures. I'm curious, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from these top players that you're working with and talking with?
Lessons I've learned personally? Oh my gosh. Like, one of the best ways to, if anybody is curious about one of the best ways to level up as a person, just be a coach. Because you get to learn from all the people you're talking to. I would say that one of the most powerful lessons for me is I get this constant reminder that we're all human. So whether you are a 10-figure business or you're just starting out, we typically all experience the same pain points with a different mask, right? And so every business, whether it's huge or small, will rise or fall at its level of leadership capability. And I see this sometimes in the same day, talking to somebody who's just starting their business versus somebody who's got a multiple $1 million business, struggling with the same thing. Is my company is slowing down, or it's inefficient, or we don't have the right people, et cetera, et cetera. And it's always, okay, well, what type of leader does your business need right now? Let's take a look at that. Usually that's what I see, and that's the lessons that I'm learning constantly from the people I talk to, is that we're human. Like, we experience the same things regardless of our business stages, and we see these patterns in how we play out. Sometimes we're way up on the peak and we're performing really, really well, and sometimes we're way down in the valley and we're just like, I don't even want to do this. And so with that, I would say each person needs a personal operating system that fits who they are. And that's something we do with these coaching mastermind groups too, is like, when these people come in and they're really, really high level leaders, you can almost be tricked into thinking they have it all together.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you start actually diving in together and they show some vulnerability or authenticity, you start to see the cracks, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. They are human, just like me. And so let's address that. Let's take a look at their personal operating system and see how they keep themselves moving forward. And that's an interesting conversation to dive into too, how different types of leaders keep themselves organized and moving forward.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that. How do all kind of leaders organize themselves differently, or is there like a certain path they need to take, and what should they be doing?
Yeah, there's a wide array of how people do this, but there's some pretty well-studied things that people can apply right away if they need to. So at the highest levels of leadership, like when we're taking a look at somebody and how efficient they are as a leader in their business, the first question is, what do their routines look like? So one of the biggest red flags for me as a coach is somebody who gets up in the morning and immediately starts working. Right. And another one is somebody who works until they go to sleep. Right. And so there's quite a lot to the human experience, and it's not just all about work. And so if we're seeing people who are doing nothing but working, then what we know is they're really kind of playing a small game. And this may not be everybody, right? And I don't want to speak in black and white. I know it's a general experience here, but what I would say is that most people are building a business from the perspective of, the business is everything in my life. Right? And because of that, they sacrifice pieces of their life. And before you know it, you start to lose focus and lose clarity and lose even excitement sometimes for the business, because you're sacrificing so much. And so with these leaders, what we do is we take a look at their routines and we start asking them questions about what their health looks like, what their spiritual life looks like, what their personal growth life looks like, and all these different buckets. And typically what we'll see is that, they have this mindset that is, well, I'm focusing everything on the business so that I can excel in those other areas. But that's just not how this works. The reality is that all of those other areas have to be in check so that you can excel in business for a long time. Right? There's a reason that most businesses don't make it past 3, 4, 5 years, right? And it's a lot of times it's because of the skill and leadership and different things like that, but most of the time it's because the person is working so hard, they sacrifice so much, they just give up.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I've seen it in myself, where I start working the whole day every day for like a week, and then the work becomes boring. I start losing sleep. Now I've like gotten out of my health routine. So I think that's one of the most important parts, is just really having your health in order. If you're not just like getting out to take a walk, like, no, I got to work, I can't take a walk. Like, dude, come on. The walk is going to make the work way better, and you're going to get more out of the time that now you have later when you take a walk or eat a good meal or whatever it is. So I'm a big advocate for keeping your health in check, definitely. Is that something you've seen that's kind of a common trait in successful entrepreneurs?
Yes. And I've also seen it as a trait in entrepreneurs who are falling apart.
Really?
In fact, I'll give you a good example. Multiple times this week, I've had coaching appointments with people who are dealing with some pretty tough stuff outside of business. And they were burning so much mental energy on these things like relationship issues and family issues and different things that were just really heavy things, right? And it would be heavy for anybody. And by the time they got to these coaching appointments, 2 guys specifically this week, by the time they got to these coaching appointments, they were really struggling with how to handle these things, which was abnormal for them. Like, these are really strong people, and they're actually really great business leaders too, but they've got themselves to this point where they're feeling like they have tons of chaos and lack of clarity, and they don't know what to do. So what causes somebody who's otherwise an exceptional leader, a very strong person, to get to this point where they feel like they just are completely in chaos and don't know what to do? Well, that's a deep question, but a really short answer is they've gotten away from the things that have caused them to operate at a high level, right? And so for these guys, one of the questions is, oh, hey, what are you exercising? And that might seem like really elementary to some people, right? But there's a lot of research that goes into this. And one of those things is that if you're burning a lot of mental calories or you're dealing with some really heavy intellectual stuff, the best way to relax and get away from that is to go do something physical. And likewise, like if you're out in the field, doing pest work all the time or whatever it is, if you have a really physically demanding job, the best thing to do to relax is to go do something intellectual, right? Read a book, listen to a podcast, whatever. But there's got to be a balance. And that's where we see people sort of getting into that chaotic state, is when they don't have that balance. Now, I'm not saying a perfect balance. I'm not a fan of that. I don't believe in perfect balance. I believe in purposeful imbalance. But the pieces have to be there, right? So kind of coming all the way back to routines, if we're talking about really running a great pest business, the first thing that I'm going to evaluate is what this leader is doing with their personal life and their routines, because those are going to be the things that cause them to either operate really well or fall apart in their business. And we can't run a really great business if we're just going to fall apart 3 weeks from now because we're working so hard, right? Yeah. If we have that pattern over and over again, we're just not going to get anywhere over a long period of time.
Definitely. You've talked about leadership a lot and how important it is so far. And I'm curious, what exactly makes a good leader? How are they treating their team? How are they going about their day? Tell me what a good leader looks like.
So there's 2 traits that I'd throw out in response to that question. The first one is self-awareness. So self-awareness is the foundation for any type of growth, period, right? Like, think about any accomplishment you've ever had or anything you've ever done or anything you've ever achieved. It all came from some form of self-awareness, and that self-awareness led to some sort of growth, right? And so if a leader is not self-aware, they're probably not going to be able to read people very well. They're probably not going to have a level of emotional intelligence that allows them to put together a really strong team and actually keep them together. And that self-awareness is what's going to cause them to see where their strengths are that they can leverage and see where their gaps are that they can address, right? And we're fans of leveraging your strengths and just being aware of your gaps, not necessarily pouring all your time and effort and energy into gaps. But self-awareness is a really big one. The other thing is curiosity. And I think the 2 go hand in hand. If somebody's really self-aware, they'll typically be more curious too. And so for people who are really great leaders, they almost have a coaching perspective on leadership where they go deep with people. They understand what problems they have, business problems they might be having. They understand what it takes to strategically uncover the gaps in their business. And that's all curiosity, right? Asking really powerful questions. Just those 2 things, self-awareness and curiosity, can cause somebody to be an exceptional leader. That leads to all the other things, right? Like communication skills and inspiring people and all the stuff that needs to be in place. Yeah.
Cool. Also, I'm curious, what do you think about, I forget like the exact term for it, but essentially like the layers of leadership and management within a big business. So I've heard kind of the common model is one leader or, manager, whatever you want to call it, can manage about 7 people. Do you agree with that? Of like, okay, you can only manage 7 people, and then, one of those 7 people now have to manage the other 7 people that are below them. Do you believe in that model, or, maybe 5, 10? What do you think is like the maximum amount of people that you can lead successfully?
I do believe in that model, but there's a little more to it. We're talking about span of control, right? And so the numbers get thrown around like 7, for example, like you said, and that's not a wrong number, but it's actually more of a range, 3 to 7. And the thing that determines what the number is the complexity of the job. And so if you have a team of pest technicians, as an example, and an exceptional leader running that team, then they might be able, and you guys have great systems, great processes, everybody's following them, everybody's bought in, then that leader might be able to manage, 7+ people. I wouldn't say go much further than that if you want to have a really well-oiled machine and a good team. But on the flip side of that, if you're, in a situation where things are maybe less chaotic, you don't have your systems and processes squared away, then every single time you bolt on another person, you're going to be increasing the complexity exponentially, and it's going to just cause really bad things. In fact, this is super interesting. So for teams and communication, that's number one, right? If you're not communicating well as a team, you're just not going to be a team. And so they say that when you add one person, so when you go to 2 people in your business, the complexity of communication increases by a factor of 4. When you add a third person, it increases by a factor of 9. Those 3 times 3. And then if you add a fourth person, it's now at 16. So the complexity of communication goes up exponentially each time you bolt on a person, which is why it's more and more important to have great systems and processes in place from a leadership perspective.
Wow. Okay. Also, something that I wanted to touch on that we were kind of talking about before the call is what are some of the most common questions you get, and what are your replies?
That's one of them. What are some of the questions you get, Mark? That's one of them. So I guess a common question I get a lot of times is, what do you guys do to help guys like me, right? And so there's always an assumption that we know what that means. Like, well, what do you like? And so that's one thing. People are usually curious to understand. They want to understand how we would help them in their very specific situation. And so how can you help me? Here's 3 bullet points for what's going on in my business. The interesting thing is, once you do this enough, like, you can respond to things like that usually pretty well with some really, let's call them educated guesses. I'm not a fan of that, though. So what I typically do in response is ask them about their business, right? So yeah, we do want to help you, but tell me more. What's going on in your business? What's your stage of business look like, and who's around you, et cetera, et cetera. So how can you help me? That's one. And I guess another question that's really common is, how can you help me grow my business? And of course, that's what everybody wants, right? And especially in a business coaching setting, most people want to know how to grow their business. And the answer to that is not always what they expect to hear. So what they're going to expect to hear is typically something like, go do this, right? Go do this thing. Go do more SEO work, or go do more marketing, or go do more door-to-door, or whatever the strategy is that you're running. Go do more. But usually the answer is, you probably need to get your service and operations in alignment with your growth, right? You need to have all 3 of those pieces of your business supporting each other. And so sometimes what that means is we've got to take a step back from going fast so that we can lay the foundation a little stronger, and then we can go fast again.
Okay.
And so another thing I'd say with that is, people sometimes expect that growth is the answer to all their problems. Growth. And the truth is sometimes growth can be the thing causing the problem. And so we certainly help people grow their business and bring more business to them. And, that's obviously a huge piece of what we do in business coaching. But what we're more interested in is having people maintain their growth and have a steadily growing business, rather than going up really quickly and then falling apart, which is a very common pattern in small business.
No, it's the same way for me as well. I always advocate and kind of preach to clients that, hey, look, the thing that I'm doing for you in terms of SEO and maybe other kinds of digital marketing, we're looking for steady growth. Like, whenever you see someone's SEO history and you see it like shot up to the top, it's usually because they were doing something sketchy, or maybe they bought something that they shouldn't have. and that's what skyrocketed it. And anything that is like that is unnatural, and it's the same way with digital marketing versus just actual business growth. Usually you can't scale anything without it breaking and without there being some problems and issues that follow. So I mean, it's the same way with MySpace. We're looking for steady growth, and I mean, for a pest control company, let's say, what kind of growth should they be looking for? Like, let's say they're at $1 million a year. Should they expect to be at like 1.2 next year and then 1.5 the next year? What does steady growth and good growth look like?
I don't know. It's a great question, right? And that's really dependent on a few important factors. So first off, what can their business really support? And so what can steady growth look like? Like, we could throw some traditional models out and say that a really great growing company is going to be growing at something like 15 to 20% year over year, right? Mm-hmm. That's a healthy pace. However, there are going to be companies who can grow way faster than that. Maybe because they're newer and they're just, going from 1 to 2 is 100%. And it just looks weird. It also could be because they have a market where there's just tons of opportunity in their market and they're able to capitalize on that. And they happen to be able to bring people in quickly. So there are factors that could cause people to grow faster, and that's not wrong. Most people are going to struggle with this, though. And they're going to throw out arbitrary numbers like, I'm going to grow 15%, 20%, 30%, mm-hmm. and they have no idea why they're even coming up with these numbers. So this is where we get into things like, well, if you want to grow and you want to put some really intelligent targets in place, like, let's understand a couple of things. One is, what's the actual market opportunity for you? What does it look like to operate with certain levels of market share in your area, right? And then what would it take? What type of return can we get for our efforts to get to those market share numbers? And the second part is, once we put a target in place, so let's just say it's 20% growth year over year, do your past trends support that? Like, do you have the past that supports you saying I can grow at 20%? If you've grown at 3% every year, saying you're going to grow at 20%, probably not realistic unless you do some real business building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so after that, and whoever's listening to this out there, you can take this away and put it in your pocket. But once you get those targets in place for your growth numbers based on your trends and data and market opportunity and the market share that you're shooting for, then we get into business routines, right? And this is where we get into the 1, 3, 5-year planning. And then for each year, it's quarterly, monthly, annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily momentum building activities. And so if people are not following that framework or something like it, at least, then they probably have a really big gap in their ability to grow with big numbers like 15, 20% or higher.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So are you a believer in EOS, or is there like specific model that you follow or have adapted?
I'm agnostic, man. And so because I'm a business coach, I talk to people who use all kinds of models, right? And so EOS is great, 40X is great, and there's a million others out there. I've got my own that I follow that's just kind of something I organically developed as I went on. The truth is we just want to see that people are following a model. Mm-hmm. And I really love this principle of models, if we could park on that for a second. A lot of entrepreneurs, this is another one of those nerdy research things that I like to look at. So a lot of entrepreneurs believe they're super creative and they can just develop anything that they can put their mind to. And maybe that's true, right? There's a lot of creative guys out there, but there's also a lot of models to follow that are already out there and already exist. Us being one of them, right? Jumping into a mastermind group and learning the models that we teach is a good example. But what typically happens is guys will jump into running a business or maybe even run a business for a long time, and suddenly they're at a new level of leadership they've never experienced before. That's really common too. And what they'll do is they'll start attacking business problems from a creative perspective. Okay, let's go to the whiteboard. Let's figure this out. Let's develop something, and then let's go see if it works. Well, what that typically leads to is trial and error, right? Just trial and error. And then you iterate, reiterate, and eventually you might find your way. Hopefully you find your way. A lot of guys don't. They just kind of crash and burn. The conclusion for most entrepreneurs in that situation is that they end up figuring out they need to go follow somebody else's model. And that's where you start reading books and listening to podcasts, maybe like this one. And then that's where you jump into a coaching group, maybe like mine. And it's like, man, I've been through all this pain and now I need to go find a model. The better mindset to have here is to start with a model. So if you've got something that you're working on, go find a model or a person that can help you with it. Follow the model until you've mastered it, then bring your creativity in. That's a winning play for people.
That is so good. And it's really so hard for entrepreneurs. I struggle with it myself because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs like to be creative, are, a little bit egotistical. They think they can do everything on their own. And no, I know the exact right way. But, if you can listen to a business coach, like let's say in your mastermind or, whoever in the space, and they've been in it for 20 years and it's a proven model, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you wasting your time trying to figure it out on your own? Like, I mean, I guess if you want to have your own little cool strategy, but I totally believe in that as well, of adopting a model that someone else is already doing, and then you can kind of adapt it and modify it from there. Because like most entrepreneurs like to think they want to do things their own way. And it's like, okay, you can do things your own way, but just like do it someone else's way for a little, like just get it working, and then you can adapt and modify it from there.
100%, man. And for anybody that needs to hear this, like, there's nothing wrong with following a model. You can put your ego aside. You don't have to be the one to come up with everything. And then on the flip side of that too, it's not a weakness to say you need help, right? For somebody who's out there struggling with running their business or trying to solve business problems, I know I talk to a lot of people, and so I know a lot of people have this sort of subconscious thing that keeps them from asking for help or reaching out and surrounding themselves with people who might be further along than them. And you gotta get to the other side of that. Like, get the help that you need, get the models that you need, and really just stop spinning your wheels.
Yeah. No, just to hammer this home, I really believe in listening to people that have done the thing that you want to do. So if you want to grow to a $10 million pest control company, then listen to the guys that have a $10 million pest control company. Like, a lot of people just listen to like random gurus in the space, but listen to the people that have done what you want to do. So the same way, like my mentor now, he runs like $1 million pest control agency. He's a fractional chief marketing officer for like 10 different pest control companies. He has equity in several pest control companies. Like, this is the guy for pest control marketing. So that's exactly what I want to be. So I mean, who else would I listen to besides him? So listen to the people that most fit your aspirations. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, not only do I agree with it, but I need more people like that around me.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
And that's, back to the leadership principles we were talking to. One of the signs that somebody is a really great leader, or even going to be a really great leader, is that they're seeking mentorship. They're seeking people who are further along than them that can help them accelerate their journey.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, here's the hack, right? Most people at this point are familiar with the principle of surrounding yourself with 5 amazing people, that your top 5 principle. And in case somebody's not familiar with that, basically what it says is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And they theorized this, and then they did a bunch of research around it years ago and found it to be relatively true across the board in almost all walks of life. So if Danny and I are hanging out and there's 3 other people in the room, we're both going to be the average of the 5 of us, right? We're going to be the average in income. We're going to be the average in what we think about politics or religion or our family life and all those things. And so if you really want to level up, you're going to focus on who you're spending time with. And here's the hack, right? They don't have to know you exist. And so for those people who maybe you don't have a circle of folks around you who are farther ahead than you, or maybe you don't have access to a mentor, this is where it really comes into getting purposeful with your personal growth. So I'll give you a silly example. For me, when I was getting into public speaking and doing a lot of conferences and things like that, one of the things somebody told me was, if you want to level up as a speaker, find 2 or 3 people that you love the way they speak and just listen to them all the time. It's like they won't even know you exist, but they'll be influencing you and helping you level up. It's like, oh, that makes perfect sense. That's why we read books, listen to podcasts, and all that kind of stuff, is we allow people to influence us. But you can take that deeper by saying, I want to follow that one specific person and just put in place the principles that they're teaching. They may never know I exist, but they're one of my 5.
Definitely. No, that's so good. And I really like that point as well. I feel like very few people touch on that, where obviously you want to have that personal connection, and ideally it's even in person. But most people can't get that, especially starting out. Like, no one wants to listen to you. You're kind of just a nobody. I don't know. Maybe people might like you just because you're a hustler. But usually, I mean, at least the way that you can get around that is there's so much free content available online. I am binging YouTube videos all the time. Like, I think 2 days ago, I watched 4 Tommy Mello podcasts in a row. I was just like, Tommy Mello, Tommy Mello, Tommy Mello, just trying to learn as much from this guy as possible, because, I mean, he has like $100 million garage door company. And if I want to know what it takes to, run a company like that, which obviously that's more so for my clients, but I want to understand their perspective and, get a whole grasp of the marketing, not just SEO, which, obviously it's more than... It takes more to run a company than just SEO. I want to be aware of all the various aspects, and I don't know, what do we need to be looking out for? Are there any, quick wins or anything that we need to be doing that maybe we aren't to get to $100 million? So I'm a huge advocate for that. And again, it is just, I think it is so unfair now. And anyone that truly is ambitious and is willing to kind of take opportunities and willing to grow, there's so many opportunities out there now. You can watch all these podcasts. You can join a mastermind like yours. You can learn from all these different people. There's so many different ways to network. So, I mean, it's really fantastic. And I think anyone who wants to make it can nowadays.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah. There's no shortage of ways to grow yourself. You just got to do it on purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Something I'm also curious about. So you've got a ton of books in the background. I feel like you're just a big advocate on, learning and all of that. Can you tell me what are some of, well, actually, first question is, list me out some of your favorite books and that have been like the most helpful and important.
Sure. Yeah. So, one of the books that really kind of set me on the path of personal growth years ago was Think and Grow Rich. And a lot of guys have that as one of their first books, right? Yeah. And so that one definitely opened my eyes to the power of really being clear about what you want. So that's one. I would say there's a couple of others that are really influential as well. I really love The Gap and the Gain. Benjamin Hardy is it's a really good book. And I had one other one on the top of my mind. The Gap and the Gain, Think and Grow Rich, and there's another one called Be Your Future Self Now. I believe that's also Benjamin Hardy. But I typically live in that space. As I'm typically, as a coach, I'm looking for books that can help me think at a high level and help others think at a high level. And so my secret is people always ask me, like, what's my favorite this and favorite that? And I'm not really a favorites guy.
Okay.
So like, when it's really hard for me to answer stuff like that, and really what I would typically do is just turn around and start reading books off my bookshelf, because I love all the books behind me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about public figures, influencers in the space? Is there anyone that you listen to, like on YouTube, or any podcasts that you listen to?
Yeah, this is probably another weird thing about me is I get almost all of my influence from the people that I'm around. The entrepreneurs I talk to, that I'm in mastermind with. And because of that, I don't have a lot of time to listen to podcasts or different things like that. So my routine might be helpful to just throw that out there. So
yeah,
every morning I get up, I'm up at 5. And I have a very clear morning routine. So I get some exercise. I have a bit of quiet time reading my Bible, and I do some praying and stuff like that. And then I typically will read 20 to 40 pages of a book. And it's not necessarily always about the book. It's about making sure that I'm priming my mind for the day and thinking and able to bring in new ideas and concepts in coaching. And so they may be business books, or they may be books on neurology, or maybe thinking at different levels and, really nerdy stuff sometimes. But that's what I typically do. And then I'll go through the day and, like last week, for example, I had 48 meetings. And so I talked to 48 different people in coaching settings and talking about growing the mastermind groups and different stuff like that. And I get to the end of the day, and that's family time. So turn everything off and, hang out with the kids and my wife, and that's that. So because I work from home, I don't drive a lot, and I'm not listening to a lot of podcasts or books or anything like that outside of my routine.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Interesting.
Yep.
Let's see what else. Okay, so I want to know what the future looks like for you. Are you going to start other empire builder groups, or is this kind of it? Tell me more about, what the future looks like.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. So when we started out with the inspection side of things, it was an awesome thing, man. It just kind of blew up into this really big, impactful thing, and we love doing that. So we think that Pest Empire Builder will end up being of equal influence in the pest space, and we're really excited about that. So we are planning to bring together as many great minds in the pest industry as we can, and really grow that group. However, my subject matter expertise personally is building communities and masterminds around subject matter experts. That's what I do, right? And so we don't see any reason to stop. So we are always interested in talking to people who have a desire to grow a group or a desire to be a coach, from a business perspective or a niche perspective. And I spend a lot of time doing that as well, is helping people with their communities, their groups. And we have a couple of other things on the drawing board that we're not quite ready to put out to the world yet. But what we think, hit the fast forward button 5, 10 years. What we think is we'll have quite a few of these groups going.
Awesome. Cool. And also, I mean, kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I don't know. I want to see if you have anything else I'd like to ask this. What is one of the biggest lessons you've learned in general in the past few years or so?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the biggest lessons I've learned, it's probably not uncommon to other people's experience, but a lesson that I've learned over and over again, sometimes painfully so, and am even going through right now with the busyness of everything we have going on, is that high performance is never about more. It's always about less. And so anytime I have felt like I've gotten off track or felt like I'm too busy to do important things, it's because I said yes too many times. And I've got too many things on my plate. And so for me, I have a common practice of really trying to evaluate my calendar and my schedule to see what I can say no to, or maybe hand to somebody else. And it takes a lot of discipline for me, especially to say no to anything relational, because I love people. I love talking with people, and that's been a lesson I've learned quite a number of times. Is I have to protect my schedule, and high performance is about saying no, not yes.
Definitely. No, that's so good. But I'm interested then, because you're a CEO at two different companies. How does that work? Because I've heard people, I mean, that they're, maybe you can be a fractional CMO or CFO, but CEO is a pretty full-time role. So are you seeing yourself as a CEO for all the continuations of, maybe these other companies? Or I don't know, how do you see that in terms of scale and, more communities potentially?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to unpack. So, one of the things I learned in my MBA program was this silly concept of economy of scale, right? And so we see that as the opportunity. So if we're really good at putting mastermind communities together and finding subject matter experts and coaches and bringing them together, then there will be a point where we really only need a leadership team and coaches within the niche. And so again, if we fast forward like 10 years from now, what I envision is a company that runs mastermind groups rather than a bunch of individual mastermind groups. So that's kind of what we're walking out here. And so rather than Mark being the CEO of 10 mastermind groups, Mark will be the CEO of one company that happens to have really amazing teams running these other niches.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And also, kind of just parlaying off of you going to business school. So, I mean, we had a phone call before this, maybe a week ago. We kind of dove into your whole story. I was really just hammering you with questions in this podcast. But something that you did do, which, so you were originally a firefighter and, you went into coaching and different opportunities and you landed, now you're running both of these two groups. Something that you did is you went back to get your master's in business. Are you glad that you did that? How was that?
Yeah, so I'm very glad I did it. Yes, I wouldn't say that I would not do it. I want to choose my words carefully here. I really enjoyed the educational experience. I learned a lot, and I really value it to a high degree. However, I've learned a lot more about business since then by reading books and being in relationship with people who are running businesses.
Mm.
And so I know there's a great deal of value in receiving high levels of education, but in today's day and age, I would say that you can get anything you want. You can grab any knowledge you want. You have access to any person you need access to within reason. And it's all at your fingertips, right? And so you don't need an MBA to be an exceptional leader or run a business or two. You just don't. Now, if it's a part of the equation or a part of the puzzle that you're putting together, sure, an MBA might be useful. For me, it was a way to transition from one career to another as I went from emergency management to the world of consulting and coaching and all the things I do now. But I know there's a lot of people out there that they kind of have this thing in the back of their mind that they're not equipped to do what they want to do. And maybe they've been thinking about college or something like that. A lot of midlife kind of people I talk to are thinking about things like that. Maybe I should go back to school, get an MBA or get a business degree. You have everything you need. You can get anything you want by buying a book on Amazon or, talking to somebody who's been there, done that kind of stuff, or jump into my mastermind group. Like, if you really just want to dive into something like that. But yeah,
no, I know. I completely agree. I actually dropped out of college my first year, and I was just like, I am not learning anything here. And also something that I don't know, I found it ridiculous that they had an entrepreneurship program where you could like major in entrepreneurship, and the teacher has never run a business before. They're just teaching the curriculum. So, I mean, how much can you learn from someone that hasn't even run a business that they're telling you how to run a business? So I personally, I majored in business administration for a year just because I thought I could learn more about the management side of things. But at least in that year that I went to school, I really didn't learn anything. And everything that I learned was either through personal education of, maybe I bought a course online or reading books or, maybe talking to people like you, or just actually doing it. Like something I love that Sam Ovens said, if you know him, he's kind of like a guru in the marketing space, is that the best way to learn how to start a business is by starting a business. Like there's no like real way around it. Everyone wants to find a shortcut and, oh, well, if I do this, then that will happen. But it's not going to happen until you actually do it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are kind of stuck at that stage where they are just constantly preparing, constantly, just trying to learn as much as possible. And I think there's definitely a place for that. But most of the successful entrepreneurs in the space that I've seen are usually kind of go-getters. And they just kind of do it. And, maybe a ton of things fail and there's a ton of problems. But still now they're actively fixing the problems instead of just trying to plan everything out and learn as much as possible. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, and I'd add a layer to it as well. So one of the things, this might have been a good question, or might have been a good response to your question of what I've learned too. One of the things that I see is that people will say things like experience is the best teacher, right? And that's true. Like experience is an amazing teacher. Mm-hmm. You cannot replace experience as a way to level up and grow. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to sort of get the experience, right? However, if you're not in control of the experiences you're having, then you might be growing in ways that aren't all that meaningful.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And so if you're running a business and all you're doing is, just kind of holding everything together with shoestrings and duct tape and you're putting out fires all the time, and guess what? You're going to get really, really good at doing that. And this weird thing happens in our minds. When we get really good at something, we start seeking more of it. So if you're good at solving problems that you create, you're going to create more problems.
Dang.
Yeah. And so when people say experience is the best teacher, I completely agree. But you've got to be in control somewhat of what your experiences are. And that's where things like purposeful personal growth and development come in to shape the experience you're having.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. I think that's a great place to end the podcast. It was really great having you on. Again, very interesting guest. I'm usually just like a local SEO person or maybe a pest control owner. So definitely cool to see your perspective on kind of the coaching side, like, building leadership teams, what it actually takes to scale. So yeah, it was so great having you on. And where can people find you on social media, learn more about you and your program?
Yeah, you can definitely just look me up, Mark Hummel. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and all the socials, of course, Instagram. I'm not the harmonica player. He's the guy who will pop up first. Mark Hummel, the harmonica player.
Yeah. I actually just saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you can also message me anytime on socials, and I typically will carve out time to respond to people. In fact, usually when podcasts like this drop, people want to reach out, and that's totally fine. I love that. So feel free to either do that on social media, Mark Hummel, or you can go to our website, pestempirebuilder.com, and learn more about the mastermind group. And then my email, if you guys want to drop that, that'd be fine too. It's mark@pestempirebuilder.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. All of those links will be in the description, so anyone that's interested, go there and you can find them. And yeah, thanks again so much for coming on, Mark. I truly appreciate your time. And yeah, it was great having you on.
Thanks so much, Danny.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. All right, cool. We'll stay in touch. Thank you.